You know that feeling when you look at a bookshelf in your own home?
Oh, yeah. Just staring at all those spines lined up.
Right, exactly. Hundreds of hours of your life just, sitting there.
Yeah.
But if someone actually pulls a book off that shelf, even a book you finished like a month ago, and asks you to explain its core arguments,
You just freeze.
you completely freeze. Suddenly there's nothing. It's almost terrifying, to be honest. You poured all this water into the bucket, and somehow the bucket is completely empty.
It is entirely disheartening.
Yeah.
I mean, you put in the time, you paid the price of attention, but the retention just isn't there.
No, not at all.
But the mistake we make is assuming that the bucket is just, naturally leaky,
Right.
or that we just have a bad memory.
Right.
In reality, the bucket isn't leaky. Your brain is actively and aggressively dumping that water on purpose.
Which honestly completely changes how we need to look at this, because today our entire mission for this deep dive is about fundamentally transforming the way you read.
Yeah, shifting the paradigm.
Exactly. We are going to take reading from this passive, sometimes frustrating chore and turn it into a highly effective, neurologically optimized tool for building actual genius.
I love that.
So we're looking at a fantastic stack of sources today. We've got articles on reading retention, some breakdowns on the cognitive differences between textbook and narrative consumption, and
That really fascinating video transcript from Dr. Grace Lee.
yes, a neuroscience expert who has basically completely decoded this process.
And what's so compelling about the cognitive research we're exploring today is how it highlights a massive glaring gap in our education system.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about it. You spend years in school. They teach you the alphabet, phonics, grammar.
Right, they teach you how to physically decode words on a page.
Exactly. But nobody actually sits you down and teaches you the biological mechanics of how to read for retention.
We're just handed these massive books and expected to figure it out through like osmosis or something.
Yeah, and the result is that incredibly common experience of finishing a chapter, closing the cover, and realizing you have no idea what you just read.
It's the worst, but as you were saying, that's a biological reality, right?
It is. The literature on memory often centers around this neurological default known as the forgetting curve. Our brains are practically designed to dump information to save energy.
Wow.
So we aren't talking about some gimmicky speed reading course today. We're looking at a strategic masterclass based on the actual mechanics of human memory. We have 4 specific hacks used by expert readers to fundamentally bypass that forgetting curve.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even talk about how to retain what we read,
Yeah.
we have to address the input. We have to fix what we are choosing to read in the first place.
Right, the pre-reading phase.
Exactly. It's all about curation over hype. And Dr. Grace Lee's origin story really anchors this concept beautifully.
It's a powerful narrative to start with, for sure. She grew up in a very small rural village, and she felt that the high school education she was receiving was, extremely limited.
Yeah.
She had these massive ambitions for college, but she realized early on that the local standardized curriculum wasn't going to get her to that level of mastery.
So she just bypassed the system entirely. Her parents bought this massive physical set of A to Z encyclopedias.
Which is amazing.
Right. This is pre-Google, obviously. And she just starts reading them every single day, picking a letter of the alphabet, poring over the pages, and systematically educating herself.
And the core lesson here is about self-directed learning.
Yeah.
Taking your education into your own hands doesn't magically stop after you get a diploma.
Yeah, definitely not.
Continuous learning is entirely your responsibility.
Hmm.
But here's the trap we fall into. When an adult decides they want to read more to educate themselves, what is the very first thing they usually do?
Well, they walk into a bookstore and look at the front table. Or they, click on whatever New York Times bestseller list the algorithm is feeding them that day.
Exactly. They default to the mass market or editor recommendations. But the sources point out this is a critical mistake for retention.
Really? Why is that?
Because when you pick from popular lists, you are outsourcing your curation to someone else's agenda. More importantly, highly popular mass market books are rarely structured in a way that deepens critical thinking or wisdom.
They're just built for broad appeal.
Right, broad appeal and entertainment. To read like an expert, you have to curate your reading list based entirely on your own values, your own specific goals, and your unique knowledge gaps.
That makes so much sense. I mean, relying on a bestseller list to dictate your personal education is kind of like getting in your car, turning on the GPS, and just driving to whatever destination is currently trending for other people.
That's a great analogy.
Right. You might end up at a water park in Ohio, which is great if you want to ride a water slide, but it's a massive waste of time if you actually need to go to the hardware store to fix your roof.
You have to drive to the destination you need.
Exactly. So I'd ask you, the listener, to consider right now, where do you see your future going? And what specific knowledge gap do you need to bridge to get there? That is what should dictate the next spine you pull off the shelf.
Spot on.
But even after you've curated this hyper-personalized reading list, there is a second major pitfall. And that is assuming that just because you have a stack of highly relevant books, you should consume every single one of them the exact same way.
Yeah, this is what the sources call the scholar's dilemma. Once you have your material, you have to match your reading tool to the cognitive task at hand.
Right.
Broadly speaking, reading materials can be categorized into two buckets. You've got textbooks or encyclopedias on one side and regular narrative books on the other.
And the approach for each has to be wildly different, right? Because, man, I remember feeling an immense amount of guilt in college if I didn't read every single page of a $200 biology textbook.
Oh, absolutely.
It felt like I was wasting money if I didn't read it cover to cover.
That is the sunk cost fallacy applied to cognitive energy. And it is a massive waste of time.
So how should we handle textbooks then?
Let's look at textbooks and encyclopedias. These are repositories of valuable data, generalized information, and proven principles. Their purpose is purely reference. The consensus among expert readers is that you should never read these cover to cover.
Wait, really? But if the information is all valuable and scientifically sound, shouldn't I want all of it in my brain?
No, because of the metabolic cost of processing dense, disconnected data. Reading a textbook cover to cover overloads your working memory without providing a narrative structure to hang the facts on.
Ah, I see.
You use a textbook to answer a single specific question you have identified in advance or to close a highly defined gap. You go in, you locate the specific data point, and you get out.
So using a textbook is essentially just like using a search engine. You type in your query, you find the exact piece of data you need, and you close the tab.
Precisely.
You don't try to read the whole internet just because you paid for Wi-Fi.
Exactly. You extract what you need and leave the rest. But that brings us to the second bucket, which is regular narrative books.
Right.
These are books that explore a specialized thematic topic to deepen your wisdom. Think biographies, deep dive nonfiction. These are meant to be read cover to cover, chapter by chapter, following the author's progression of ideas.
Okay, but wait, so even if I'm reading a regular book cover to cover, the sources say I don't necessarily have to read it word for word?
Right.
On the surface, that sounds like a total contradiction. If I'm supposed to follow the author's argument from beginning to end, how can I just skip words?
Well, it sounds like a contradiction until you understand how the brain processes narrative schemas. Think about the author's intention. They are taking you on a journey to build a specific mental model. You need to walk the entire path to understand how the argument is built, but you don't need to analyze every single pebble on the ground.
Oh, I like that.
A lot of words in a narrative book are just scaffolding. Anecdotes, repetitive examples, transition sentences, they're just used to support the core principle. Once your brain grasps the core principle, reading every single supporting word actually slows down your cognitive momentum.
Okay, so if the textbook is a search engine, the regular book is like a guided museum tour.
Yes, exactly.
You want to follow the guide through the different wings of the museum in the right order so the history makes chronological sense. But you don't have to stop and read every single word on every single tiny plaque or stare at every tile on the floor to understand the theme of the exhibit.
That analogy holds up perfectly. You are matching your cognitive approach to the author's intended structure.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you save an immense amount of mental fatigue, which is vital because you're going to need that excess cognitive energy for the third and, frankly, most critical phase of reading.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you've curated the perfect book for your goals. You matched your reading style to the book type. You completed your guided museum tour.
Right.
You finish the reading session, close the cover, and you feel brilliant. But then 24 hours pass. And what happens inside the brain next is just brutal.
It is. We run headfirst into Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve.
Right, the forgetting curve.
As a biological default, humans lose about half of what they are exposed to for the first time within just 24 hours. And it continues to decay rapidly after that.
Oh, so half of that museum tour is just instantly demolished overnight. But why? Why does the brain betray us like that after we put in the work?
It's not a betrayal, really. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Oh.
Your brain is incredibly greedy when it comes to energy.
Oh, yeah.
It weighs about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes 20% of your metabolic energy, maintaining neural pathways for every single piece of information you encounter.
Like a random fact from a book.
Exactly. Doing that would be metabolically bankrupting. So, through a process called synaptic pruning, the brain actively clears out what it deems as short-term, unnecessary data. If you don't use the information immediately, your brain assumes it's garbage and throws it out.
Wow. Which means, unless we actively intervene, our reading is just creating expensive garbage. So how do we stop that pruning process?
We have to signal to the brain that the information is crucial. And the way expert readers do this is through a concept called recollection exposures.
Recollection exposure.
This is the actual secret sauce of reading retention. It means that after you close the book, you schedule specific intervals, like 30 minutes later or an hour later, to actively reflect on what you just learned.
I want to pause here and make sure this is crystal clear because it's so easy to misunderstand. When you say recollection exposure, you do not mean just opening the book back up and rereading the chapter, right?
Absolutely not. Rereading is just another passive exposure, and it's one of the biggest traps in learning. Yeah. When you reread a highlighted passage, your brain recognizes the words. It feels very easy. Psychologists call this the illusion of fluency. You mistake that feeling of easy recognition for actual mastery.
Yeah.
But recognition is not recall.
So what does a true recollection exposure look like in practice then?
It requires active mental retrieval. You sit there without the book, and you mentally wrestle with the concepts. You force your brain to reach back into the filing cabinet and reconstruct the information from scratch.
That sounds hard.
It is.
Yeah.
You think about how those principles apply to your specific life, or you try to explain them in your own mind. It is this friction, the actual, sometimes difficult effort of mental retrieval that tells your brain, wait, we are using this. Do not prune this pathway.
Right.
That effort is what physically transitions the information into long-term memory.
Dr. Lee has a really tactical way of executing this too, so it doesn't disrupt the flow of reading. As she's doing her museum tour through a regular book, she isn't trying to memorize everything on the spot.
That would ruin the flow.
Exactly. But when she hits a principle that genuinely resonates with her goals, she puts a small sticky tab on the edge of the page. That way, when she closes the book, she has a physical map.
Right.
A few hours later, during her recollection interval, she doesn't have to guess what to reflect on. She just looks at the tabs and uses them as prompts for that active mental retrieval.
It's an elegant system because it separates the act of gathering information from the act of processing information. You can't efficiently do both at the exact same time.
It's basically the difference between grocery shopping and cooking.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, reading the text is just gathering the raw ingredients and throwing them in your cart. The recollection exposure, that active mental retrieval, is the actual cooking process. You can't just buy flour, sugar, and eggs, leave them sitting on your kitchen counter and tell people you baked a cake. You have to combine them, apply heat, and transform them.
Right, you have to do the work.
Which brings up a slightly uncomfortable thought. If we skip the reflection part, if we just read and immediately move on to the next thing, are we essentially just hallucinating that we've learned something?
Yes, we are entirely hallucinating learning. Without that active reflection, without the heat of the cooking process, those ingredients just spoil on the counter. The knowledge never integrates. It remains superficial data that will be pruned within a day.
That is wild. But it sets up the final piece of the puzzle perfectly. Because the act of reflection keeps the ideas alive in your mind, but the ultimate output, the way you truly cement this knowledge and activate your reading genius,
The final step.
exactly, is translating that long-term memory back out into the physical world.
Right. The fourth hack is where the real transformation happens. When it comes time to take notes, you have to write down your own synthesized thoughts, not the text itself.
Which flies in the face of literally everything we are taught in school.
Completely. Think about how note-taking is traditionally taught. A teacher writes a bullet point on a chalkboard, and you are expected to copy it down verbatim.
Right.
Or you read a textbook, and you essentially copy and paste the author's sentences into a Word document.
I spent my entire college career highlighting massive, dense paragraphs and just transcribing them into notebooks thinking I was studying.
Most people do, but the sources explain exactly why that fails. The human brain struggles immensely to remember someone else's verbatim words. The author's phrasing doesn't match your natural speech patterns. It's foreign data.
Makes sense.
However, the brain is incredibly efficient at remembering its own creations. This is known as the generation effect.
Okay, so how exactly does the generation effect work?
When you encode information by generating it yourself, when you phrase it in your own words using your own analogies, you are forcing your brain to create novel neural pathways rather than just passively tracing over someone else's.
Ah.
It's the difference between driving a car to a new location yourself versus sitting in the passenger seat while someone else drives. If you drive, you remember the route because you had to make the active decisions at every turn.
So instead of writing down the author's quote, you write down the connections, the epiphanies, and the insights that fired off in your own brain during that recollection explosion we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
And by doing this over years, you eventually build what Dr. Lee describes as an encyclopedia of your own thoughts.
Precisely. You are documenting your mind's interaction with the material, not just the material itself.
I do want to playfully challenge this idea, though, because I can hear some people listening and thinking, wait a minute, I'm reading a book by a world-renowned neuroscientist or a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian.
Right.
Isn't it a bit arrogant to think that my thoughts on this topic are more worth writing down than the expert author's carefully chosen words?
What's fascinating here is that it's not about arrogance at all. It is certainly not about ignoring the expert's factual data.
Right.
It's about assimilation. The goal isn't to replace the author's established facts with your own made-up statistics. The goal to internalize their proven principles so deeply that you can translate them into your own mental framework.
Oh, I see. So it's more of a translation exercise than a replacement exercise.
Exactly. When you write down your own thoughts, you are documenting how that expert knowledge interacts with your specific worldview. You are collaborating with the author. The result is that you internalize the material so deeply that you never run out of your own insightful things to say.
You really own the knowledge.
You do.
Okay, so
Okay.
what does this all mean for you? Let's bring all of this together. We've covered a massive cognitive journey today. First, curate intentionally based on your own values and knowledge gaps.
Skip the hype.
Skip the hype. Second, match your reading style to the book type. Textbooks are a search engine, narrative books are a guided museum tour.
Right.
Third, schedule reflection time to beat that 24-hour forgetting curve. Put the book down and force your brain to actively retrieve the concepts. And finally, record your own synthesized thoughts to build that personal encyclopedia.
It truly is a paradigm shift.
It is. So I challenge you to pick just one of these hacks to apply to whatever you're reading today. Try the 30-minute active recollection window after you finish reading. Just see what it actually feels like to force your brain to retrieve the information without looking at the page.
It's harder than it sounds.
It really is. You will immediately notice the friction, but you will also immediately notice the difference in your retention tomorrow.
And as you test that out, I'd leave you with a final lingering question based on what we've explored.
Okay?
If the ultimate goal of expert reading is to stop copying the author's words and instead synthesize their principles to build an encyclopedia of your own thoughts, do the original books eventually just become disposable scaffolding?
Oh, wow.
Right. Once your mind has extracted and synthesized the wisdom, does the original source even matter anymore? Or is your personal interpretation now the actual truth you live by?
Does the book just become disposable scaffolding for your own mind? That is a profound place to leave it. By curating, matching, actively recalling, and synthesizing, you aren't just plugging the holes in the bucket, you are transforming the water into concrete. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and we will catch you next time.